Everything was a blur as I looked through the pages in front of me, but I did manage to register the words 500 per week. I signed on the dotted line, and right there, I was under contract to Alfred Hitchcock. He was shorter and even rounder than I was expecting. He was remarkably unattractive, but from the moment he turned to welcome me, he couldn't have been more charming. The subject of why in the world he wanted me under contract never came up. I didn't know why me. I didn't know what promises I had made in that contract I had signed. All I knew was that I always kept my promises. Woo! The name's Tippy Hedren. I've been interviewed and quoted and written about more times than I can count since the early 1960s. I was the girl. I starred in The Birds for Alfred Hitchcock, a man I look back on with admiration, gratitude, and utter disgust. Long before the Me Too movement, victims of sexual assault and harassment were silenced and forgotten by history. As America's sweetheart, Tippi Hedren, star of Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, reflects on her experience with the Universal Studios industry and her tumultuous relationship with the enigmatic director. Hedren reminds us that the horror women face is in real life. Tippi, by Tippi Hedren. One of the most important things to me as a child was the day I had whatever you call a life-altering realization when you're 7 years old. I was walking up a hill on my way home from school when a woman approached me asking if I'd ever thought about modeling. "My name is Ella Jane Knott. Would you please ask your mother to bring you down to the Donaldson's department store at her earliest convenience?" All I could think was, me, a model? Seriously? I was stunned, ecstatic, flattered, giddy. I don't think my feet touched the ground as I ran home. Of course, I knew absolutely nothing about modeling, so I simply watched and listened. Out there, commercials and occasional print work came along every now and then. But there was no way around the reality that models have a limited shelf life. I was in high, non-stop, glorious demand when I was in my 20s. My magazine covers and catalogs weren't going to pay the rest. And I came to the realization that I had no idea what I was going to do. Then, on Friday the 13th of October, 1961, the phone rang. "Are you the girl in the Seago commercial?" It seems Alfred Hitchcock had been watching the Today Show that morning and had happened to see the commercial. He'd promptly called the executives and ordered them to find the girl. There was a lot of talk about the next Hitchcock film. The Birds. Every actress was vying for the role of Melanie Daniels. And he gave it to me. From that moment, it felt like I'd been, thrust into the lead of an Alfred Hitchcock film. From the very beginning, Hitchcock relentlessly stared at me on the set. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with the director looking at his actors. But this was an expressionless, unwavering stare. No matter where he was, his eyes were fixed on me. And now, I wasn't some naive 14-year-old girl. In my 10 years of modeling, I'd learned how to deflect unwanted male attention. I'd never learned, though, how to deflect something like this. I'd start seeing Hitchcock in the back of his limo driving past our house, and I'd found out that he was occasionally having me followed. I couldn't tell anyone. It was the early 1960s. Sexual harassment and stalking were things that didn't exist back then. I've never gone into detail about this. I'll simply say that he suddenly grabbed me and put his hands on me. It was sexual, it was perverse, and it was ugly. I couldn't have been more shocked or repulsed. The harder I fought him, the more aggressive he became. And then he started adding threats, as if there was anything he could do to me that was worse than what he was doing in the moment. He said he would scrap the new project, and I said I didn't care. I said, let me out of my contract! And he looked at me, directly screaming, I'll ruin your career. Finally, I managed to push him off me once and for all, and looked back at him. Do what you have to do. And I stormed out of his office. I was shattered. But I wasn't remorseful, not for a single moment. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but refusing Hitchcock wasn't one of them. Everything in the picture had been building towards the famous bedroom scene. The scene in which my character runs up to the bedroom, and she closes the door, and suffers the most vicious on-camera attack by the birds in the whole film. Hitchcock said it would be just me and a flock of relentless, homicidal, mechanical birds. He lied. I finished getting ready and walked out onto the set to see a cage built around the bedroom door. You know, hell of it is, I'm afraid of birds. I heard Hitchcock yell action, and right on cue, the handlers began hurling those flying birds at me. They started pulling in my arms and pegging in my face and stop it! Stop it, please! Leave me alone! And I started to cry. The bedroom scene lasted about 1 minute in the final cut. But Hitchcock spent 5 days filming it before he finally decided he had what he wanted. I knew Hitchcock was doing everything in his power to keep his promise to ruin my career. In many ways, he succeeded. I'm watching all the coverage on Weinstein. This is nothing new. I've dealt with sexual harassment my entire life. Hitchcock wasn't even the first.